Welcome back to the Comic Book ASM Artist. Today we're doing our review of Avengers Endgame. So we'll start off by doing a spoiler-free and then move into the spoiled review. And I'll give fair warning before I do that. So, when at the outset when I look at this movie, immediately, I don't think there's any shadow of a doubt in my mind. I say that no matter what the situation is, this is a movie that needs to be seen. Whether you're a comic book fan or um, you have no knowledge of the film, of the franchise, anything like that, I think the payoff of the film is bigger, if you've invested in watching all the movies. But there's just so many emotional connections and just visual spectacle and unforgettable moments as well that when I look back and think about, like, I think they're still really cool, and I think that even a general moviegoer would have a good time with this movie, and I think they did that on purpose. So, so that's my main thing. I mean, this is a big deal. This is probably gonna be one of the biggest movies that we've seen in the theaters in a while, just from like a cultural standpoint, I'd say. There's just been so much work put in towards it, having all those movies build upon each other and, reference each other and connect and all that. And I mean, this model is what all the other companies are trying to master, whether it's with, their horror franchises, which didn't work out with The Mummy, or, unfortunately, even DC is having a rough time with their footing. Not to bash on them if you're a huge DC person, but um, it's not even a question as how well Marvel has pulled off um, their movies. They're just churning them out and printing money essentially, even for um, movies that wouldn't seem like a huge deal. Like they became successes, like the Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a pretty obscure thing for them to do. Granted, the shape that that movie took was way different than the initial creation of those characters. It still was a successful movie with the innovations and things that they did do to that. So, once again, if I look back on this movie, highly enjoyable. I'd say anyone and everyone should see this. I think this is a cinema event. Um, I say see this in the theater if you can, because I think this is going to be one of those movies that people talk about for a while. You look back on different decades and time periods where people talk about like Star Wars and things like that, and how huge like Batmania was with 1989 with that movie and stuff like that. This is another one of those. This movie is well on its way to $1 billion at the box office within the first weekend, which is unheard of. So I hope it does it. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the franchise and the movies. Um, Once again, if I'm looking at this at an outsider, there's enough, um, I'd say, information about the characters that someone sitting down can watch the movie and enjoy it. I'd say if you're a hardcore person, um, you'll probably have a maybe bit of a tougher time with some of it, but I still feel that enough things happen in this movie to make it be something that's not going to be brushed off. So, I guess I'll say all that. So, I think that's the end of the spoilery part. And if you're looking for other ASMR triggers and stuff in the video too, I will be tapping on this popcorn tin I got. I've got my ticket stubs from the movie that I'll be doing some crinkling with, and maybe the cup as well. And I'll be doing some page turning while talking in this Avengers Endgame special that came out last week. So, if you don't want this video or this movie spoiled for you, I'd say click off here. But keep going if you want to know my thoughts and favorite moments and all that good stuff. So I'm going to count down from 5, give it a pause, and then start. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, starting the spoiled review now. Okay, so as I was saying before with general audience, I think the connection is strong enough in this movie to merit enjoyability. You know, the initial opener in the movie, seeing, Hawkeye lose his family in a matter of seconds due to the snap. That hit me hard. I've got family and kids and all that good stuff, and so, that really got to me. Even though it's a superhero movie, there's very real and genuine moments, and I think that the directors and the story writers definitely took advantage of human emotion throughout the movie. And then we see the other thread tied with Tony Stark having a chance at having a wife and a kid as well. Like, I was so glad that they did that. And the little girl that they got to be his daughter even reminded me a lot of my own daughter. So to see what was at stake for Tony, it wasn't just brushing off his shoulders and saving the world. And, he's already left Pepper to deal with her feelings regarding when he saves the world and stuff. But to, you know, have a little kid involved in all that too, to deal with the possibility that her dad is not coming home, was huge. So I can really appreciate the what was at stake in that movie regarding families and the route that it took. It ended up being, you know, someone was gonna lose someone, and I think they kind of built it that way, where it's like, if Hawkeye was to go, he would have left behind his family. But if it was Tony, he would have ended up leaving behind his family. So there was, kind of up in the air. And you would feel, sad regardless of which one had passed. Now, granted, I mean, Iron Man is a huge deal, and I was kind of expecting him to die, but really based on this magazine here, as I said in my previous video, it was structured really weird. This has like behind the scenes stuff, but then the second half of this magazine's Avengers special in here, it's all Chris Evans behind the scenes thoughts from all of his previous roles as Captain America. So I thought, why would they set that up and draw the spotlight on Captain America when, you have the whole team? And I was thinking, well, maybe it's just for this one because it's got him on the front. And I looked at the other newsstand books, and no, it was just him they did that with. And when you look at the little blurb here, it says, as Chris Evans, Captain America, faces an uncertain future, we review his past through exclusive interviews from the set of each of his films. There's a lot, but we can do this all day. So with him saying the whole uncertain future and this and that, like, I mean, even in the trailers, they set it up with, Iron Man could possibly die in space and all that. So I'm just like, the last time I checked, granted, I only watched the one trailer and stayed away from all the others. But the trailer really set it up where, the Avengers were going to try to get Tony out of space. And part of me, from the initial reaction, thought the weird suits they had on were like space suits. And as we come to find out, that's all quantum realm and everything like that. So I actually missed out on Ant-Man and Wasp, so the suits weren't a dead giveaway for me. I do wish that I hadn't known about the suits, though. I think it would have been more impactful. But, unfortunately, there's so much stuff online, and even seeing like the Funko Pops of them in their little outfits and stuff did spoil that a bit. And, articles were already blabbing about the quantum realm and stuff like that. So, that was stuff that just my eyes grazed online. So if I hadn't known that, I think I would have gotten an extra bump. But having known that, it was a little um, less suspenseful. There was still, the stakes that were raised. They had basically enough stuff for one trip to each of the time periods to retrieve the stones and come back. So there was still the stakes of not screwing up and making sure that things didn't get out of hand and all that. And as we see later, all Steve Rogers is able to get more Pym particles later on. But for that first little bit of the movie, we are met with the fact that it might not go so well. And we all know going into this thing that some of the heroes are not coming out the other side. And so, that was a very real stake. So, I would say up until the Pym particles part, there was definitely a sense that we would lose someone in the realm for sure. And so, there was a suspense element there. Um, Regarding the humor and stuff like that, I would say I don't think this movie had as much like witty banter, not as much conversational um, retorts and things like that. I feel this movie had more sight gags than it had like well written quips, which is okay. It was a nice change, and this was kind of a more serious movie. I mean, there's definitely still funny moments, but I felt that there were more sight gags than anything else. And the biggest sight gag and the most unexpected, being Thor becoming this huge, overweight individual. What's funny about that, though, is the fact, like, the audience definitely got a good laugh out of it, and they did write that, I feel, as a comedic thing in the beginning, and as it goes on, it makes more sense. Thor is dealing with depression. He had beheaded Thanos and everything, and it didn't fix the problem, and he had already lost so much regarding his mother and father, and his place in Asgard and Asgard itself, and all the other things in his life. So it was very real that he was dealing with depression, and when you do that, your body is definitely one of those things that it takes a toll on sometimes. But I was reading in the future that Marvel is trying to do more different representation on films, and they're talking about even bringing in like a body positive hero, a overweight individual for those who are overweight and want to see a hero overweight on the screen. But I thought it was odd for them to say that after seeing that movie where they did play the weight for a comedic, at least partial gag in the beginning, and as you go, you understand the severity of it more. But so I thought that that was kind of a strange take that they would say that in an article, but still use that like that. Now, regarding the switch, or rather the sacrifice, where it was up in the air between Black Widow and Hawkeye for the sacrifice. Um, out of all of the female characters, I would say Black Widow is my absolute favorite character, and I was super bummed that she um, is gone after this movie. I know that they had talked about a Black Widow movie in the works. I'm not still sure if that's going to happen or not. I mean, that could have just been a red herring, so that people would assume that she would still be around. And even in that fight scene, like in my head, I'm just like, well, I know they announced the movie, so it's gonna be Hawkeye. And then when she had died on the screen, I was like, so is this gonna be a prequel movie? Are they still doing the movie, or was that just speculation? So I still hope that we get like a prequel of her training and stuff like that. And I know in the comics they talked about her and Winter Soldier having brushed past. So I hope we get some sort of story out of all of that. And yeah, I felt that that was a missed opportunity. And so with they have the Captain Marvel movie and stuff, and I didn't see that. I don't really care for that character, which is fine. You can have your own opinions and stuff, but I wish out of anyone and everyone from out of all the females, I felt like Black Widow would be the one who deserves to have a solo movie the most. She's been an established character and one we've invested in so much. So in order to, for them to overlook her like that, and she wasn't even in the shot towards the end where it shows all the ladies together, and we get like an, I want to say F Force was the name of the team where it was all female Avengers. We get that shot, and she's already dead by that time. I felt that that was a real shame because I like her character so much. So missed opportunity for sure. But once again, it was one of those things where if it had been Hawkeye who had died in that moment, then he would have left behind his family, and so we would have had to experience that moment there. But they had to balance that between him and Tony, and so they had it be where Tony and his Tony's kid and Pepper are left behind mourning their father, as opposed to Hawkeye with his family. So that was, I think, something they looked at. They wanted to still have someone be with a family at the end of the movie, so they had to make that choice. So I can appreciate the other random developments they had, like with seeing um, Hulk being in conversation, being casual in his Hulk form. I would say it was like a pseudo Mr. Fix It, because if you've read the books and know the history with that, that's the Gray Hulk where he takes on like the gangster persona and wears a pinstripe suit and stuff like that. I wish we actually would have seen him in some sort of suit, like an actual dress suit at some point to kind of do a nod to that. But there was a silly aspect to that, like why would the Hulk be a mobster sort of thing, but they still kind of use the idea of, well, okay, now he's in his big form, but he is in full control. And so I thought it was cool to see Bruce finally be at a point where he had mastered the Hulk and been able to control him. So that was nice to see him be successful to, you know, take that form and, use it for good as opposed to it being an uncontrollable thing inside of him. So I thought that that was really cool. Um, what else? Obviously, I would say my favorite moment in the movie would be when Captain America does get to use Thor's hammer. I thought that was cool. I knew that it was coming. They've been talking about it, but it was cool to finally um, see them run with that on screen and have him use it against Thanos as well. Um, Something that I thought was funny though, like I felt um, they should have just kept it to the initial part when he's using it though. He kind of uses it a little bit more in a couple other fight scenes. I wish it was just like the one moment that he had been able to pick up and use the hammer. I felt the more that he used it, it was less impactful. And he was using it in tandem with the shield, shooting his shield with lightning and throwing it and things like that. And that's cool. But like towards the later part, it's just he's worked in the background with all the others fighting the Sea of Chitari and just kind of doing his thing. And the novelty of it wore off. So that's my only gripe with that. But I thought it was cool to definitely see. Yeah, of course, Cap can pick this thing up, and as it was hinted in Ultron, like yeah, he can probably do it, which concerned Thor. So I can definitely appreciate that. It was cool to see him go toe to toe with Thanos. Um, Yeah, I'm just trying to pull all these moments out of my head here. Other cool stuff for sure. Definitely, I am so glad that Tony was the one to kill Thanos. Um, I cannot express how appreciative I am of Marvel going that route, and the route in general of making the spotlight be on the original uh, cast of the Avengers. You know, the other heroes will have their spot in the sun, but I was so glad that the focus was on the original team and that Tony, who, Iron Man was pretty much the beginning of the success that is the Marvel cinematic universe. And, they took a shot with that. Iron Man could have tanked, and we couldn't have gotten any of this afterwards. They would have pulled the plug, to do what they have done without having it be financially successful would have definitely been something that they wouldn't have wanted to do. So yeah, we can really thank Robert Downey Jr. and the team who worked on that movie for the success that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So for him to deal the final blow was perfect. Granted, it was the thing that killed him, but it was poetic and it was perfect. So I'm glad they did that rather than having Captain Marvel one punch him. Even though they've established she is strong, Thanos hits her, she doesn't budge and everything. And I was concerned as she was getting the gauntlet, just like, oh, let's see what happens. But I am so glad that Iron Man got it and did what he did. And it was kind of a given. I mean, the gauntlet was made to kind of look like the Iron Man gauntlets and stuff like that. And there's other elements of it that if you want to analyze, you're just like, well, how did that suddenly work? Because, like in the previous movie, you know, um, Thor was, they were talking about the uniqueness of the gauntlet and everything, and how that was the only thing capable of harvesting the stones on it and this and that. So for them to suddenly have their own gauntlet that they could utilize was something you'd have to kind of look the other way on, where they had established the importance of the gauntlet itself. Um, and then the fact, like, Hulk puts it on, he says, I'm the only one, it has gamma coming off of it and everything. And, it pretty much wrecks Bruce, and granted, it kills Iron Man as well, it kills Tony. But, I think he would have gotten even more destroyed than the Hulk was, based on Hulk's body type and the properties of him, where he's tougher and he's kind of has a little bit of regenerative properties with his skin and things like that. So you have to kind of turn a blind eye in there and just say, no, no, it's fine, because this was the poetic moment, the beginning of the MCU as the guy to kill Thanos. So if you if you choose not to pick at it, it becomes a better movie. And I mean, at the end of the day, this thing is not made for speculations and theories and the microscope thinking, but it's to be enjoyed as a spectacle, as an incredible form of entertainment and innovation, which it has been for sure. Um, I would say probably maybe my biggest. I don't know, I don't have a lot of complaints, but I definitely feel like when the others who were snapped came back, we didn't get as much time with them. But once again, the reason was to focus on the initial team. But where it felt there was a better balance in the previous movie, we had like the different teams doing the different missions. They did that here with the original crew, but when those other guys came back, they were really, it felt like they were just pieces on that board. We didn't get a lot of cool quotes out of them or anything, or really anything. We got like a nod from Chitaur, from Black Panther there, and Peter wasn't even really said any one-liners too much, and they just kind of showed up and did what they could do. and the focus was still on the original team. So, and then at the end of the day, it was Captain Marvel who showed up and took the giant ship out of commission. So that was her contribution, as well as I was surprised at how fast in the beginning that Tony was rescued from space. They didn't feel like they needed to spend time on that, which I thought was kind of an interesting turn because of how the previews had made it seem like, oh, this is definitely a huge point. Tony might die out here, and that was something that was solved in a matter of probably 10 or 15 minutes. I do felt that the initial maybe 45 minutes to the hour of the movie was really spent investing in the aftermath of the snap. And so there was a lot of sadder moments. There was a lot of the heroes like thinking down on themselves and stuff. And, there was a lot of that. The first act of the movie, the first third of the movie, did have a slower, somber pace. But I think their reason for doing that was, like I said before, this is a movie that is so huge. Believe it or not, there will be people walking into this movie, seeing this movie without seeing the others. So the studio really had to set up the devastation from the previous movie for those who hadn't seen the other movie or even the other characters. So they had to establish what was at stake for Tony, what Clint had lost, the fact that there was still something to solve after Thor had seemingly killed Thanos. So there was all those elements and those pieces for them to look at those other audience members and say, hey, you know what? We're glad you're here. We're gonna tell a narrative for you too. So I think that was the main point of that. So I mean, they could have made it shorter, and they could have made it punchier and all that stuff, with more jokes and things like that. But like I said, I think the tone of this movie was the stakes are higher, the devastation was real, and not everyone is coming out of this alive. Um, Now I was surprised too, but it did get spoiled for me inadvertently. That's just the internet, unfortunately, and that is a beast. For I had someone flippantly during a live stream talk about how Captain America was gonna come back aged and all that, and so I thought that was well, they didn't say the comeback age part, but they said that he was gonna go back in time and be with Peggy. So I wasn't expecting to see him on that bench, but I was already in my head spoiled for him being with Peggy. So I'm glad that Cap got his happy ending, and it was cool to see him in an aged form too, which has happened in the books. I was surprised that Falcon is who he passed the Captain America mantle to, but in the same stroke they kind of set it up because Falcon is a military guy in this movie too, in this franchise. So I think that made sense. Bucky, definitely served with Cap too, but he has his spotty history as being Black Ops and everything, and killing people from the other side and our side, and his history is darker for sure. And I wish that they would have taken that route as they did in the comics, so we can see that struggle. So I was kind of bummed that Bucky didn't take it, because I would have liked to seen what happened in the comics happen in the movie, like verbatim almost. But as we know, the movies and the books aren't always 100% on the same page together. So I am interested though in the fact that there is going to be a series on Disney Plus or whatever they want to call their streaming app, where it is Bucky and Falcon. Now, I don't know if that's going to change and it's going to take place after this movie, and we get to be where it's actually like Bucky and the new Captain America, where it's you know. So I don't know if it'll be a prequel to these movies or if it'll be after the fact. I'm kind of hoping that it is going to be an after the fact and they kept that a secret. So we'll see what happens. Um, but they're really playing their cards close to the chest here. Like they've announced those series, but they didn't give them detail. Um, so we'll see what happens with that. Yeah, there's people who like to pick apart time travel. So, they'll try to make sense out of what Cap did. I would have loved to have seen him put all the stones back in their correct places. And they even made the comment prior. They said, well, time travel doesn't work like it's been established in all these movies. They said if your future self goes into the past, it is still that person's future. So that is an interesting concept because typically it, they have it where it's like you go to the present afterwards and stuff has been set in motion. But I think their reason for having Steve do what he did was, I believe, and this could be I could be totally wrong here, but since Cap was frozen on ice, that Cap was still thawed, and Steve was still off doing his thing afterwards. So I believe that he went back, he connected with Peggy, and he quietly went into his life as a civilian. Wow, the Cap on ice was still, in there until he was thawed out in the later 2000s. And so that's how we're able to get him be in the universe still and have everything happen that happened. But then we kind of look at that a little bit too, as I'm thinking, I'm just like, well, that would still be the same Cap, though, I guess. But like I said, it's not something to be picked apart, but I think that's the thread that they want to go with. And I believe in the past they've mentioned like Peggy was married, but they never said who she was married to and stuff. So they've alluded to her um, being with Steve, but they never went into the details. They left that a question for this Steve to go back and plug into while the other one was on ice. So I don't know. It's interesting, but it is something to think about. Because I'm just thinking, just like, well, if the one from the ice eventually gets thawed out too, then he will eventually do all the other things that Cap was meant to do, including in that last moment, go back to the period with Peggy too. So I don't know. Time is a weird thing, and like they explained it, like you can't change it without it branching off and stuff. And I mean, he definitely changed it because he married Peggy. But so that's something to think about, but it's not something to really get hung up on. The major thing is they were trying to give Steve a different closing arc than him dying. So I can appreciate that. I'm glad that he finally went back and did the thing they've been talking about for pretty much his entire character. Now, the thing I was surprised the most by, I would say, I wasn't expecting it, was for Thor to suddenly become a part and co-opt Guardians of the Galaxy as Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm interested to see the turn that takes that franchise to have Chris Pratt and Chris Hemsworth share that space together and see what happens there. And now I do feel, um, I don't know, both those guys have pretty big personalities, and obviously, as we've seen, they don't agree very well together. It's pretty much like whenever Thor is around, he assumes the leadership mantle, and Star Lord is overcompensating. So it'll be fun to see the dynamic they bring to there, but I hope that that isn't the entire dynamic. I hope they flesh that out where it doesn't, it's just the 2 hour, no, I'm in charge. Like, that gets old after a while, but I hope that, obviously that's where it's at right now, but I hope that it develops and we see more character out of both of them. Maybe they're able to teach each other some things. I am curious too as to see if Thor will get in shape or if he'll continue to be a overweight individual. So we'll see what happens. Um, so I've talked a while here, and I'm glad that you have listened to me. I'm gonna make some sounds now with a couple of these items. For those of you who are interested in that, I didn't want to have um, the sounds eclipse the discussion and things like that, but I can appreciate, ASMR in all of its forms. So we're gonna do a little bit of sounds now, and focal point here. We'll get a couple page turns in here just because. But after that, we'll move into the other items. Alright, that's gonna do it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Down below, please don't leave any spoiler comments. I will delete them if I see them. So we want to keep this fair for those who get in for the first 5 minutes of the video. Um, but thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to what I have to say. Make sure to check out the Bull number 1 on Indiegogo. The digital copy is just $3. The link's below. And you all have a super slumber. Thanks. Bye.